Hi, welcome back to Keep It Dirty, a podcast where my guests share their life living functionally and sustainably, and the why behind their experiences navigating through our ever changing environment. I am your host, Leslie Dowling. I'm a corporate speaker sharing how one can jumpstart your path to increased revenue and productivity through restorative health techniques. And today it is a pleasure to welcome my guest, Patrick Asare. Patrick is an electrical engineer and is a principal at UGI Energy Services. Patrick has written social, political, and energy policy topics and has recently written an autobiography called The Boy from Boadua. I know I probably said that.
Not
And
perfect.
and it is a story about one African's journey of hunger and sacrifice in pursuit of a dream. And it is such a pleasure to have you on my show. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you. I'm well, Leslie. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to speaking with you. How are you?
I am doing well. And just for all
Great.
our viewers and listeners, this was such a powerful book on your story and your journey and the way that you just put it out there. It's like the law of attraction, just putting that positive energy out there and to surround yourself with positive people that has helped you through this. So I would love to hear all about your book and all about just how this all kind of came to be as to why you wrote the book.
Okay, that's a that's a really
The
long
long
story, but I'll try to condense it as much as I can. I was born in a small village in Ghana called Boadua, in southeastern Ghana. And for those who are not very familiar with West Africa, Ghana is a small country in West Africa. And it's now a population of about 30 million people. When I was growing up, it was actually much smaller. The population at the time was maybe about half of what it is now. And I was born in this small village called Boadua, which at the time had maybe about 300 people living in this village, and a typical African village in the early 1960s. And my parents, both of whom were illiterate, had 14 children. so, so quite a large family. And I was one of the youngest. Actually, I was number 12 in line. And so with illiteracy, my parents in living in a small village like that, and struggling to feed 14 children. It was a constant struggle to find the basics, even to survive. And so education was really the last thing on anyone's mind in that environment. And you were born as a kid in that place. You helped out on your parents' farm, and then you got some primary school education, maybe middle school at best, and then you came back and worked on the farm. So that was sort of the defined path. I mean, for every kid born in this village, and that was supposed to be my path as well. But when I started primary school, actually got into middle school, and then along the way, I realized that I love to read, and so I was. And this was a village without a library, no books, nothing, and so finding reading material was never easy. So I went around satisfying my reading appetite with scraps of discarded newspaper. So I picked up one of these scraps from the ground one morning, and I read something on it, and that completely, I mean, changed the trajectory of my life. I read about an elite secondary school in the country that educated children of the country's elite, and kids went from this secondary school, which is the equivalent of high school in America. They went from there to universities in England. I mean, Oxford and Cambridge universities in England. And then they came back to Ghana. They became the president, the prime minister, ministers of state. And so, as a village kid, reading this thing, I mean, this thing makes an impression on me. And I say, hey, I want to go to this elite school and then someday become one of these big people in Ghana. So that's how it all started. And so I got on this journey trying to get admission to this secondary school, and without the knowledge of my parents, because they had no clue what anything about education meant. So I went on this journey, and ultimately got into secondary school. I mean, it's a very long story, but ultimately I got into secondary school and got into university. And again, I hit a financial roadblock because you had to have money to go to university in Ghana. So ultimately, I after secondary school, I bounced around the country about another 2-3 years, and then I chanced upon this scholarship that took young people from Ghana to the Soviet Union. This was the height of the Cold War years. That was mid 1980s. And so the Soviets used to offer scholarships to young people from Africa to go study in that place. So I got one of these scholarships and went to the Soviet Union to go to college. And I lived there for 6 years, and then graduated from there. And then my path took a different turn, and I came to America instead of going back to Ghana, which was the original plan. And my first stop in America was Buffalo, New York, and and I got a job. My first job in America was I was hired to teach Russian in the K-12 school system. So I started as a teacher, and that was my introduction to America. That was a rude awakening, teaching in an inner city school district in Buffalo. We know now I've been in this country for 30, this is my 34th year in America. And we know about all the problems in our inner city school districts. And so that was what I came to. And so that experience, I taught in that system for 2 years, and that experience, what I saw there, then took me back all the way to my beginning, because you're talking about poverty. I mean, the kids I was teaching were dealing with, I mean, the same sorts of issues. Poverty in this country, we have racism laid on top of that, and all kinds of. So that really got me thinking. And so that was the genesis of this book. I mean, this book is motivated by that teaching experience, what I saw in those classrooms, and how those experiences related to my own life. So this is sort of a synthesis of a journey, and I'm using that as a platform to examine some of the social issues we deal with in this country. So
Yeah.
long story.
Wow, but it's so fascinating. I mean, I just couldn't put this book down, and it really is.
Thank you.
Incredible. And we're passing it around to all the kids.
Thank you.
My middle son and your son grew up going through the school system together. And that's how we made this beautiful connection, knowing your family for many years. But if there's anything that you can reflect on at this point, is there anything that you would have changed or done something differently looking back? Or do you think everything kind of, there was a reason for where you were at that time and what you have just, learned over the years?
Yeah, so that's a very fascinating question. I started out by saying I loved reading. I discovered my love of reading when I was about maybe 8-9 years old, and we didn't have access to books or anything really academic in that environment. And so going through the education system in Ghana, things are pretty basic. And so when I got to secondary school, when I had to choose my future professional path, in Ghana at the time, the options were you did science and then you went into engineering, or you did biology, chemistry, and you went into medicine. I mean, we had people majored in history, economics, and other subjects. But I mean, those were not really, there weren't that many opportunities as far as jobs. And so most people either went into the engineering sciences or the medical sciences. I mean, I always knew I couldn't stand working in a hospital. And so I stayed away from the biological sciences. So I did my
Mhm.
math and physics and stuff like that. And so I ended up on the engineering path, and that's what I went to the Soviet Union to study. Knowing what I know now, I am an engineer, but I spend a lot of my time writing and reading, and so to answer your question, I mean, if I had grown up in this country as my son and your son are growing up now, I probably would be a literature major. I mean, I probably wouldn't be an engineer.
That's really interesting. And
Yeah.
I also noticed that there is a fellow classmate of yours as a
Yes.
child that
Yes.
was you mentioned was brilliant and
Yes.
so
Francis.
driven,
Yes.
and so maybe you could share a little bit about that, because throughout the chapters it was very bittersweet. You
Yeah.
always kind of reflect back and always
Yeah.
had stayed connected with him.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that gets really emotional for me, really. Um, so this was a kid that same age. So we started primary school together in this village. I mean, his parents. He came from a family that was much smaller than mine. I think he had two siblings. I mean, I had 13 siblings. So that was a big difference right there. His parents actually had a bit of education. So his father had a formal job, not a formal job. I mean, he was a security person at a diamond mining company that was adjacent to the village that we were growing up in. So he uh, he's one of the most brilliant people I've ever come across. I mean, I realized that early on, and so we went through the school system together, the primary middle school system together, and in this village there were no expectations for anyone, for any child. I mean, everybody, about, I would say 99% of the parents in this village were illiterate, and so the kids there was no expectation that anyone would go on from middle school to secondary school, and you had to pay tuition to go to secondary school. So that was a limitation. Nobody had the money for that kind of education. So that was a mindset. And so even though he was that brilliant, he himself never expected to go beyond that. But then when I had my big dream and I shared with him, I mean, we're very, very close friends. We're always competing for the top spot in class rankings, and then everyone else was behind us. But he was super brilliant. I mean, I couldn't really, I mean, match him. And so, but he sort of challenged me, and I credit a lot of my success to being around him. And so when I started preparing for the secondary school entrance examination, I mean, he did that as well because I was doing it, and he passed the exam as well. But I mean, his parents just dismissed it out of hand. I mean, my parents, I mean, couldn't afford it either. I mean, it was a scholarship that ultimately took me to secondary school, which wasn't an option for him, because the scholarship I won was because my father was a cocoa farmer. His father wasn't a farmer, so that scholarship opportunity wasn't available to him. And I don't today. I don't to date. I don't see what other path. I mean, he could have taken to go out of the village, and so that has, over the years, I mean, for the last 50 years, I mean, since we parted company, and that has always been a really sore point for me, because to leave that mind, in that village, untapped. I mean, it's almost criminal. I mean, I think. So that's why he's a constant theme in the book, as you mentioned. I mean, I keep going back to him, and even today in my blogs and writings, separate writings, I think about him a lot, and he informs. I mean, his situation informs a lot of how I view the world, and the opportunities and what happens to people who don't get, opportunities or luck, or, some of the things that, some of us are fortunate to get.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think it's really amazing how you just brought to life in the book just all these situations, crossroads that
Yeah.
had such a powerful impact on you. And wasn't it, I read somewhere that when you filled out the forms, you're like, I don't know why, but I wrote down that my
Yeah.
father was,
A cocoa. Yeah.
cocoa,
Cocoa farmer.
a
Yeah.
cocoa farm. And that really was the catalyst
Yes.
to get you, which
Yeah.
it's sort of like,
Yeah.
you're brilliant, you're smart, but it's like there's this angel that just
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
tapped in and said, just put
Yeah.
that down. And
Yes.
that's really what opened up the doors, right? To
Yes.
like a
Yes.
domino effect, which I thought was very
Yes.
fascinating.
Yeah. 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 Without a piece of information, a lot of the rest, might not have happened. and and so life is I always equate life, I mean, to like a sporting game. I mean, to like a football game or something. I mean, the quarterback throws a ball and it gets deflected and he's intercepted, and the game is lost. And so that there are all these sort of random events, I mean, that shape our lives, and how things determine, whether we're successful or not. And so that's how I look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that, and I'm a true believer in this, that and it's something that I do and practice with, getting back to our fundamental roots,
Yes.
how we were raised, our foundation. And if you don't have that solid foundation,
Yeah. Yeah.
like you experienced
Yeah.
working in the inner city in Buffalo,
Yeah.
that these children had no self-worth or just
Yes.
had any goals,
Yeah.
and that is so critical
Yeah. Yeah.
to have that,
Yeah.
no matter where you are in this world. I mean, at the
Yes.
end of the day,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what we have, but if we have the foundation of just love, trust, self-worth,
Mhm.
that's so important. And I thought that was really beautiful how you interlace that in your book.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what you just described, what you just talked about, is really uh, my passion now, because that's what I saw. The kids had no hope in their eyes. I mean, the students I was teaching, they really had no hope in there. They just uh, they had this feeling that the entire world was against them, and so why even bother? And when you start out, I mean, uh, that was the environment I grew up in, and it was hopeless. but I credit fortunate to have the parents I had, my father especially, and I write a whole chapter about him in the book and how he influenced me. So even in the midst of that poverty, there was that force that was so influential in my life, and that's really what made the difference between me and Francis, the brilliant boy I talk about. I mean, he. Uh, and so there are all these factors that drive, whether we go forward or we stay stuck. And so writing this book, I had those students in Buffalo in mind, that I'd learned some lessons that a kid reading this book, I hope, will light some bulbs in some kids' heads, and help them move forward.
So after writing this autobiography, I'm assuming it was very cathartic,
Yeah.
and just taking, the chapters of your life and reliving
Yeah.
it and writing this.
Yeah.
How has that changed you now, or what are you doing differently today? I know that you uh, have gone back to Ghana, and
Yeah.
you're instrumental in a lot of programs. So maybe you could
Yeah.
share a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, thanks for that question. So it's actually a great question. Um, so even before I started writing this book, I knew how lucky I had been. because to go from that village to secondary school to start with, which was not even supposed to enter any child's mind in that village. So to go to secondary school and then to go to university in the Soviet Union of all places. Um, the Soviet Union that I went to, I got to the Soviet Union in August of 1985, and that was probably about 4 or 5 months after President Mikhail Gorbachev, came into office. And so he began his perestroika, the reforms that ultimately led to the breakup of the Soviet Union. So I was right there from the beginning of that, and coincidentally, I graduated in June of 1991, and then within about a couple of months after that, he was deposed from office. And then in December that year, I was still in the Soviet Union when all this happened. And so when the Soviet Union broke up, I was still in the country. And in the 6 years that I studied in the Soviet Union, I had a chance to travel extensively, throughout the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union has 12 time zones. I mean, it's a huge continent, and it used to be a collection of republics. Ukraine. I lived in Ukraine actually for the entire 6 years, but you back then you get to travel everywhere: Russia, Belarus. Um, and then on top of that, we traveled extensively throughout Western Europe. So you could go anywhere: England, France, Germany. So we're there pretty much like every couple of months we travel somewhere. So that exposure to both sides of the Iron Curtain, we were behind the Iron Curtain, but as foreign students, somehow they allowed us to travel back and forth, which I think was a strategic mistake on their part, because we brought a lot of Western stuff in the country, and it sort of opened some of the Soviets, so that getting that exposure. And then coming over here to America to see, what I've, been able to see here in the last 30 whatever years. I mean, it's like I have a mirror to the world. you, I see a lot. And so it almost feels like, I've been shown this movie that I need to sort of translate. I mean, and so that is and so even before I wrote this book, I was doing some writings, and the thing I was focusing in particular on was two areas really: education and energy. Ghana. The education system there, I mean, it's improved a little bit since the time I was growing up, but it's still not, in some ways, it's actually worse now than it was when I was growing up. I tell people that if I were born today in the same family that I was born into in the early 60s in that same village, I probably wouldn't go. Probably wouldn't go anywhere, because back then the school system, even though it was very basic, we had great teachers, and everything, the society functioned pretty well, even in the midst of that poverty. Now it's a confused mix of, I don't know. I cannot, when I visit Ghana nowadays, I cannot really recognize the society culturally. I mean, it's changed, and so if you're poor in Ghana today, you are worse off than than I was as a kid. I mean, during the early 60s. And so we talk about inequality in America. You go to African countries today, I mean, they are the most unequal societies on this planet. And so if you are poor in Africa, you're really poor because, I mean, if you're a poor kid in this country, in America, I mean, you go to school, you can get free school lunch. I mean, you can, get, parents get food stamps and those kinds of things. But in Ghana, you are invisible to anyone. I mean, the government doesn't know you if you live in the village. And so, education has become one of my passions. And then because I'm an electrical engineer, I mean, I have pretty good knowledge of the energy systems. Ghana and much of Africa, our electricity grid, electric power supplies is constant. We have constant blackouts. And so those are two areas that I've tried. I mean, so you mentioned in the intro that I write on energy policy articles and social, and so that's sort of things I'm involved in. I haven't made much headway because our political governance systems there um, are not that effective. And so trying to do some of these things, I mean, to get the right people, get to the right people, I mean, it's always a challenge, but I will continue to, make those efforts.
Yeah, because that's the first thing that I thought of because of
Yeah,
political and socioeconomic
yeah,
issues. It must be so difficult, but we need
yeah,
people like you that never give up, just keep
yeah,
on plodding
yeah,
forward and
yeah,
to tap into that.
yeah,
So I'd love for you to also share um, just meeting your wife, then having a couple of years, several years of that separation of
yes,
you pursuing your dream, your
yeah,
designate your degrees,
yes,
and she is home raising your daughter.
yes.
So maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So that's a whole book in itself.
I know. In
Yeah, yeah,
so many
yeah,
minutes, can you?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And she's been my wife, Patricia. I mean, she's been described by some friends of mine as the most patient wife in the world.
Oh,
So, so yeah. So we met when in the period when I was actually in limbo. I had completed secondary school, and I couldn't go to university because because of the financial problems, and so I was bouncing around. I was helping my father on his farm, and then I was, walking around trying to figure out what to do next. And so that was the time I met her. She was a nursing student at a hospital a couple of miles away from the village. This was a hospital that had been set up by some German nuns, and so she was in the training, the hospital's nursing training program. So that's where we met. I met her through a mutual friend, and shortly after we met and we started dating, I got a scholarship. I mean, to go to the Soviet Union, and unfortunately, it wasn't. It was a scholarship. Those scholarships were awarded to young, young men and women, and none of it wasn't supposed to be for families. And so I was in my early 20s, and so I got a scholarship, and we had just started dating, being in a relationship. So that was quite a difficult moment, deciding what to do with the relationship, and whether to stick around Ghana and find something else, or go to the Soviet Union and break up the relationship. So it was quite a bit of back and forth on that, and we both decided that we could probably make it work, long distance, but the problem was, back in those days, those were the days before cell phones, and I was going away for 6 years, and I didn't really know when I was coming back to Ghana. I mean, it could very well be the entire 6 years before I had the chance to come back, because you think about traveling from Moscow to Ghana in those days, and yeah, we didn't know but we decided that we're going to figure it out. So yeah, we left it at that, and I went to the Soviet Union, and most of our communication was through letters, because there were no phones at the time, and you wrote a letter from the Soviet Union. It took probably about 3-4 weeks to get to Ghana, and then she replies and takes that long. So there it was. So we kept it going, like that, and then And then after my third year, it became possible for me to travel to Ghana. And I was actually, I spent, during those 6 years, I spent every summer in London. I was working summer jobs in London. Sometimes stayed in Netherlands a little bit, but mostly in London. So I was in London for the summer, and then this opportunity came, and actually at very short notice. So I decided to fly from London to Ghana, and because it was short notice, I couldn't really send a letter or notify anyone. So I hopped on a plane and went to Accra, and then traveled to the village. I mean, the next morning, and so I went to my house first, and my father and mother were at home. I mean, I hadn't really communicated much with them for the 4 years, and then somebody mentions that, hey, Patrick is here. My father jumps up from yeah, so it's like, who is this? Is this a ghost or what? and uh, and so we do a big sort of introduction, and we talk a little bit, and then I walk up to the hospital and to see Patricia, and it was similar sort of I think so. So that was how it happened, and so I still had another 2 or 3 years to go, but then because I had figured out how to travel between Ghana, and so I did a few trips back and forth for the remaining years, and then when I graduated from the Soviet Union, the plan was to go back to Ghana, to get married and, start a family and all that. So that's when our daughter was born, Jennifer. That was, I think, my final year in the Soviet Union. She was born. But then, as you read in the book, a family tragedy happens, and my father dies tragically, and that blows up, the whole arrangement. And I go into this, deep sort of depression, and I wasn't functional just because of the relationship I had with my father and the influence he had on me, and some of the things I was planning to do for him when I came back, and this thing happened, and so I decided that I cannot live in Ghana, in the sort of in the immediate aftermath of that event, and so that is what brought me to America. I mean, I went to some place. I was going to some place to on a healing journey, really. So I came to America, and it was supposed to be temporary. My visit here was supposed to be temporary, but then I got here, and then things changed, and so that introduced another sort of disruption in the relationship, and yeah, it was a big challenge at that point, and we got into some serious difficulties, but somehow we stuck in the relationship, and ultimately got married in Ghana, went back to Ghana, got married, and then they joined me here. She and my daughter was 10 at the time when they were able to join me here, and then our Patrick, next buddy Patrick, was born probably a year or two after they got here to America. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that your daughter probably has a lot of memories in,
Yes.
living in Ghana. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that she was born in the
No.
States. So that's
No.
really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess when doors close, when you think, that there's, what else is there? Other
Yeah.
doors open, and it
Yeah.
brought you here to the States
Yeah.
and the opportunities that you've had here.
Yes.
And so you went for your master's, you went to, is it Tufts? And
Yeah.
also, so
Yeah.
you're,
Actually, yeah. Yeah. So I went for my master's in engineering. So I did my first master's degree at Purdue University. That was in engineering,
Mhm.
and finished that and worked in industry for about 6 years, and then I decided to get another master's degree in business, and that's when I went to the Tuck School at Dartmouth College, and so that's where Patrick was born. Actually, when I was a grad student at the Tuck School. Yeah.
So, what other goals and what else is there for Patrick Asare to do? What is on your bucket list?
I don't. I've been asked a few times whether I plan to do another book.
Mm-hmm.
I think I will, but I haven't really put any sort of concrete plans or ideas together. I mean, I my next book will probably be a novel, sort of a fiction book. I like to use the view of the world that I have. I mean, to sort of to examine some topics. One of them is immigration. Immigration is something that I've become quite familiar with, and it's a big issue in the world right now. It's affecting every country in the world today, and this is and so that is one subject I think about a lot, and so maybe someday I'll do a novel fiction project on that subject, or something social, cultural. The what I do now, I write a blog. Well, I'm sure I write a blog, and it's just a collection of questions that come to mind. It's I as I look around the world, I mean, I see things, and the way people do things, the way people sort of approach different issues, whether they're political, social, cultural, and I have a lot of views on that, because I've come across people from pretty much everywhere, and haven't had those close relationships with people of all backgrounds. You think about some of these issues differently, from how other people do, and so you look at a place like America, where Americans really don't have that much interaction with the rest of the world, because we live on a continent in this country. We don't we're surrounded by oceans, and so we don't really get to experience other people, and so as I look at how I'm an American now, as I look at how my fellow citizens, I mean, look at the rest of the world, you see holes in the in how people think, and look at the world, and I think that's one of the areas, and so writing the blog is an attempt to shine light on, and it's one viewpoint. It's my viewpoint from my worldview, and so I'm doing that, to hopefully get other people, to look at these things from various angles, and so that's what I'm doing in the interim, and so that's a big preoccupation of mine currently. But the book idea is at the back of my mind. So and then actually the other big mission now is to I'm trying to get myself out there. I mean, to talk to children, and actually high school, college students, to sort of talk about some of the messages I shared in the books, some of the lessons, and so I'm doing some of that now. talking to young people in schools and sort of mentoring organizations and some college students. So yeah, I'm doing that. Actually, I did a talk at Penn State Berks campus last week, so which was
Oh, that's
interesting. So
so inspiring. I mean, you
yeah,
just have such a wealth of wisdom. You have led
thank you.
such an amazing life and all that you've been through.
Yeah,
And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, just seeing different, living through the eyes of people going through so many different stories,
yes,
living in different countries. And we here in America are just so lucky to have the freedom and the rights that we do have. And I think a
yes,
lot of people just take that for granted and they don't realize what
yeah,
other people have been through. And just a little taste of just my grandmother, my father coming here, emigrated to this country, having nothing and
yes,
had a dream and just pursued it. I think that is what really has grounded me as a
yeah,
person,
yeah,
to respect that everybody has different paths of lives and we don't really know
yeah,
who that person is behind this aura that
yeah,
we all have.
yeah,
And that's why I'm so fascinated in speaking to people and
yeah,
knowing their backstory.
yeah,
But I'm so excited for you, and that's awesome that you're going to be
yeah.
writing another book. I want to read it, and just
Thank you.
empowering the
Yeah,
next generation. I think that's really
mm,
important.
mm,
If you can make changes in just that aha moment of a younger
yeah,
person, just listening to your story and knowing that they can
mm,
succeed and they
yeah,
can with community. That's so
mm,
important.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I want to thank you, Patrick. This
yeah,
has been
yeah,
really a fascinating
yeah,
45 minutes of just listening and
yeah.
engaging. And so for people, for all our viewers and listeners, if they're interested in reading your book or getting in touch with you or seeing where you're going to be speaking next, or maybe having you go to their campus or
Yes.
to business to speak, how can we get in touch with you?
Thank you for that. And thank you for all the very kind words. I mean, 45 minutes have gone by
Oh,
very fast. And yeah, it's fun to talk to a neighbor, a friend, and
yes,
yeah, our kids have always been together. And so yeah, it's this has been a fun. And thank you for asking. So the book, anyone that's interested in the book can find it on Amazon.
hmm,
It's on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, walmart.com. You can find it there. And my website is where you can contact me. You can contact me through my website. There's a contact me page there. The website is patrickasareauthor.com. patrickasareauthor.com. Asare is Asare. And so it's all one word, patrickasareauthor.com. If you go to my website, you can see a wealth of information about the book, some of the events I've done. And then you can also access my blog, from the website.
that's wonderful. And yeah, I like I said, this has been really interesting journey, and I definitely have to have you on after you've written your book and just to recap what you're doing on your next journey in life.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Um, but again, thank you, Patrick, for
Thank you.
taking the time out of your day to be here as a
Yeah,
guest.
yeah.
And I also want to thank all my listeners and viewers to remember, get out there, ground with Mother Earth, and keep it dirty. Take care and have a great day.
Thank you.